I'll start out this morning by asking a question. What's in a name? That's part of a pretty famous work done by Shakespeare, in Romeo and Juliet. That's a line I'm sure everyone had to learn back in school. The follow-up to that little phrase, what's in a name, that question, is that which we call a rose by any other word would smell as sweet. And what that's basically saying is, sometimes names can be paper thin, you call it anything, but what it is, what it does, is going to be the same thing. So in that instance, it was talking about the Montagues and the Capulets not getting along. They hated each other. These two families battled each other because of the name. There was something with that name. A historical event that would not. They could not talk to each other. They couldn't come in contact with each other. And in times past, we put a great emphasis on names. Family names, country names. Names of royalty. That you had King Charles IV, and even Pope Benedict XVI. And you look at those, and okay, there's an importance behind that name to these people that chose these names. Just a lot of times, royalty, they'll change their name, to reflect someone that there was either a historical reference that impacted them, or maybe as a personal importance that came to them, that's why they chose that name, and in that sense, names are what help define us and who we are. Like I said, that in the past, royalty, even today, royalty and different things like that, we attribute these names because they have a meaning. Now, in more modern times, however, we, especially in the West, in the Western culture, we see this moving away from names having as much meaning, at least where we're at, and I started looking up because, I think it was around early 2000s, I started hearing different names like Skylar and Jaden, and I'm like, yeah, that's an interesting name. Where'd they come up with that one, But, here's, for example, a few of the baby names that they say in 2019 are going to be big. And a couple of these I've heard before, and a couple of them I've never heard as a name. So you have Xander, but it's spelled with an X, short for Alexander. Dax, Jackson, spelled with an X. Briar, Revel, Royal, Story, Luna. These, so, we're getting away from Michael and all these names that you've heard forever, John, and so more and more people are just coming up with these names because they're different, And when I was young, I would come up with all these crazy characters, and I would just because I drew all the time, so I would come up with all these characters, and I would just give them these names that had no meaning. I was like, this is a cool name, it's different than John or Roy or whatever, this is a cool name. But, the point that I'm trying to make is that more emphasis was put on the historicity of a name, like the what was backing up that name, what did that name mean, what was the importance of it. Someone was named usually after an influential family member or a person who had great impact on that parent's life. For instance, my brother, his middle name is Anthony. My dad's middle name was Anthony. So it kind of passes down, and now Caden's middle name is Anthony. So it passes down because there's a historical reason for that name. Now, if we take this and apply it to the Christian name, what are we saying about ourselves? Are we living up to our name? What does it mean to be called Christian? And growing up in going to different churches and stuff, I've heard, once saved, always saved. You all you have to do is say this one time, and it's kind of like, I kind of pictured it as like a mountain climber. You have your ice pick, your anchor, I had to look up these names because I didn't know, as a snow picket anchor, and you're climbing up this ice mountain, and you hit that in the snow, you drive it into the snow, and then you attach yourself so you can't fall, basically. It's an anchor. So I imagine that that's what most of us are like when we're Christians. We get to that point, oh, we made it, let's drive our anchor in right there. Feels great. You just hang in there, you don't want to get to the top. You're just, okay, I made it right here, just above this line, You got people passing you up saying, how you doing? Yeah, it feels good being a Christian. It's like that's where they want to be. That's where they're comfortable, So are we really living up to our name? Starting in James, and I'm going to kind of go over some of the same things that we went over this past night in youth, but a little bit a different direction with it. Starting in verse 2. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience, but let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. But let him ask in faith, nothing wavering, for he that wavereth is like the wave of the sea driven with the wind and tossed. For let not the man think that he shall receive anything from the Lord. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. So this is the section that we went over in youth the other night. It was basically, so we've been talking about love, the basic two commandments, love thy God, love thy neighbor, and going off of that, okay, well, with love there comes trust, and with trust there comes action, and actually moving, when God calls you to move, and because love can be paper thin, if we let it, so it can be just a word, just another descriptive word. Let's turn to Philippians, and we'll be going back to James here in a minute. Chapter 1, verse 4. This is the Amplified. In every prayer of mine, I always make my entreaty and petition for you all with joy, delight. I thank my God for your fellowship, your sympathetic cooperation and contributions and partnership in advancing the good news, the gospel, from the first day you heard it until now. And I am convinced and sure of this very thing, that he who began a good work in you will continue until the day of Jesus Christ, right up to the time of his return, developing that good work and perfecting and bringing it to a full completion in you. It's just what you were talking about a minute ago. He's going to complete that work in his people. His people are going to be lacking nothing with respect to his will, what he wants us to have, that love, that power. And in 1 Corinthians, this is also going to be the Amplified. Starting in verse 8. Love never fails, it never fades nor ends, but as for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for the gift of special knowledge, it will pass away, for we know in part, and we prophesy in part, for our knowledge is fragmentary and incomplete. But when that which is complete and perfect comes, that which is incomplete and partial will pass away. When I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. But I became a man, I did away with childish things. Now in this time of imperfection, we see in a mirror dimly, a blurred reflection, a riddle, an enigma. But then, when the time of perfection comes, we will see reality face to face. Now I know in part, just in fragments, but then I will know fully, just as I have been fully known by God. And now there remain faith, abiding, trust in God and His promises, hope, confident expectation of eternal salvation, love, unselfish love for others, growing out of God's love for me. These three, the greatest graces, but the greatest of these is love. So we will be perfected, at that time. And this is available to us. This is what's available to us is if we have that, if we bear that name, Christian, this is what is available to us. Now back to James, going on in verse 9. Let the brother of low degree rejoice in that he is exalted, but the rich in that he is made low, because as the flower of the grass he shall pass away. For the sun is no sooner risen with the burning heat, but it withereth the grass, and the flower thereof falleth, and the grace of the fashion of it perisheth. So also shall the rich man fade away in his ways. Blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord hath promised him to them that love him. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. Do not err, my beloved brethren. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, and cometh down from the Father of lights, with whom is no variableness, neither shadow of turning. Of his own will begat he us with the word of his truth, that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. So in that, as Christians, is basically what that is saying there towards the end. We're a royal lineage. We're a set apart people. We are to live in the mansion with the King. Some of us, like the lazy mountain climber, would rather stay on the edge of the property in the shed, next to the fence. Why? Why is that okay? Why is that a acceptable place to be? And I would say that that's because we don't want to fully be open to God. We don't want to completely be open to Him. So reading on in James 19, or 1:19, wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. For the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. And His ways are higher than our ways. His righteous anger is righteous because of a transgression of His standards. Our unrighteous anger is a result of transgression of our pride, basically. That person did this wrong thing to me, and how dare they? That's the attitude that we have. That's our default. That's what a lot of our anger comes from. It's okay. Somebody did something to me, so I'm going to be angry. In verse 21, wherefore lay apart all filthiness of, I'm going to mess this word up, superfluity of naughtiness, and receive with meekness the engrafted word which is able to save your souls. And why give in to your flesh? It will ultimately gain nothing, lead to your destruction. But that's what we do. That is what our carnal mind wants to do. We want to give in to that. We want to just be lazy, do what we naturally want to do. This is the battle that goes on within us. James, keep reading verse 22. But be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. For if any be a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like unto a man beholding his natural face in a glass. For he beholdeth himself, and goeth his way, and straightway forgetteth what manner of man he was. But whoso looketh into the perfect law of liberty, and continueth therein, he being not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this man shall be blessed in his deed. So, this is pretty much what the lazy mountain climber Christian, will do. Pick up the Bible, read it. Okay, I got my 10, 15 minutes in, and go on. That's what we naturally want to do. That's what our flesh wants to do. We don't want to sit there and grow closer to God naturally, because it's against our carnality. It's against that flesh, basically our pride, everything that we have to give up. It's against all of that. So, going on in verse 26, if any man among you seem to be religious, and bridleth not his tongue, but deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is vain. Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction, and to keep himself unspotted from the world. So we are wholly set apart from the rest of the carnal world, called out of Babylon. We are not to be of the world. We are to be in the world of God, set apart, out of reach of all these things that come against us. So starting out a few minutes ago, I'd kind of insinuated that, in more modern times, names, don't have as much meaning as they once did. In our modern culture, we like names, but we like to call them something different now. We call them labels. A lot of us will call them labels. A lot of us are ruled by those labels. A lot of us live our lives by labels. We govern ourselves by labels, and we get them placed on us from other people. Other people will place those labels on us. Labels such as liberal, conservative, religious, free-thinking, humanist. This past week there was a commercial, and I don't know if anybody has seen this commercial from Gillette. I'd heard about it, and then I seen it, and then I was like, well, yeah, it does kind of, it's kind of driving at a point there. But basically, the commercial was going along with this new this label of toxic masculinity. Is basically going along with this. It depicted a series of scenes, that showed bullying, just laziness, roughhousing, men laughing from behind grills at kids getting beat up, and and stuff like that, and it was just, I didn't see the whole commercial. I saw bits and pieces, because obviously I think it was like a minute and a half long or something, but it was as if the problem was men acting like men, basically. This was the message that was shown by this commercial. It was men acting like men, and that's the bad thing. There were no women in there doing anything wrong. It was just men acting like men, and that's a bad thing. We got to put a stop to that. And that's basically what it was saying. It said we got to do better. Which, in all fairness, everyone can do better. There's some truth behind that, but what I've seen in that, and what I've seen in other things, that have come up, the enemy is behind this movement, is behind others just as dangerous. He's trying to destroy the family unit. Abortion's rampant. And this is a good way to take a shot at the head of the family. And this is this is what this is trying to do. It's trying to destroy the head of the family unit and further destroy the family itself. But that's one example that I've seen out of many examples that I've seen. And of course you have the different rallies over here and things like that are showing the same things. And you just look at it and you say, there's no love there. There's no love. You got one side, you got the other side, and they're screaming at each other. It's just what the enemy wants. It's just what Satan wants. He wants chaos and hate. And that's exactly what you see when you see all of this stuff. And so coming down to it, Christian means Christ-like. So we have to ask ourselves, is that name, is that label, is that paper thin for us? Is that something that is just something that we have, or is there meaning to us behind that name? Every day we have opportunities. We have hundreds of opportunities, not to only identify as a Christian, and people know that, we're Christians, but it's not even enough to act like a Christian. We have to do like Christians, because anybody can act like a Christian, so we have to do like Christians. And in saying that, it's like when I'm at work, it is extremely hard. That's a challenge. When you think about it, okay, not just identifying as a Christian, you're not just acting like a Christian. You have to do that. You have to do it. That's what James is saying. You have to do it. This is a doing thing. So, anger, not a good thing. Not a good reaction. So, it's a every day, every minute, every second of the minute, thing to do. And I've got to get better at that. So, I know that it's a very prominent thing, especially right now in our lives, in our immediate area here. That just there's a lot of hate, just because of labels. And I've seen that, running up to this year. There's been about 10 years or so of just getting this stuff built up. So we have to do it. We have a royal name, and as they would say, own it. So that's our call, to be Christ-like, to own that name, Christian.